Imagine a place so saturated with suffering that the very soil beneath your feet is composed of 50% human ash. A place where the tide, instead of bringing life, occasionally washes charred bone fragments onto the shore. We are in the Venetian Lagoon, Italy. But forget the romantic canals, the gondolas, and the glittering lights of St. Mark's Square. Our destination today is Poveglia, a small island with a history so disturbing that the Italian government strictly forbids anyone from setting foot on it. Tourists are banned, local fishermen avoid the surrounding waters at all costs. For many, it's not just an abandoned landmark. It's a portal to a past that should have remained buried. But what happened here to transform a Mediterranean paradise into what many call the most haunted place on earth? The answer is hidden beneath centuries of despair. It all began with the Black Death in the 14th century. As the plague decimated Europe, Venice needed a place to quarantine. The dying Poveglia became the final destination. If you showed even the slightest symptom of a fever, you were torn from your family and cast away to this island. There was no treatment. There was no coming back. Thousands of people were brought here simply to wait for the end. Huddled in massive plague pits that were eventually set on fire to try and contain the disease. It is estimated that over 160,000 people perished on this tiny patch of land over the century. The earth literally transformed into a layer of decomposed human remains. But the physical horror of the plague was only the first chapter. The true nightmare of Poveglia began hundreds of years later, when the walls of a new imposing building started to rise on the island. What was intended to be a place of healing soon became the stage for one of the darkest experiments in modern medicine. For centuries, Poveglia remained a graveyard, a silent witness to the thousands who were burned and buried within its soil. It was a place the world wanted to forget. But in 1922, the silence was broken. The Italian government decided to repurpose the existing structures, and a psychiatric hospital, an asylum, was opened on the island. This is where the story shifts from a historical tragedy into a visceral nightmare. Imagine being a patient during that era, already suffering from mental illness, only to be shipped across the water to an island known as the Island of Death. The very atmosphere was heavy with the weight of the past. And for those trapped within the hospital's walls, there was no escape from the shadows. It didn't take long for the reports to start. Patients began claiming they could hear the agonizing screams of the plague victims from centuries ago. They spoke of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of the wards and the feeling of cold, invisible hands touching them in the dead of night. But because these people were labeled as insane, their cries for help were ignored. The doctors dismissed their terror as mere hallucinations, a symptom of their crumbling minds. However, the true horror wasn't just what was hiding in the shadows. It was what was happening in the operating rooms. According to local lore and dark historical accounts, the asylum was overseen by a doctor whose ambition far outweighed his morality. Driven by a twisted desire to find a cure for insanity, he began performing crude and experimental lobotomies. In an era before modern medical ethics, this man used the isolation of Poveglia as a shield. He believed that the brain held secrets that could only be unlocked through brutal intervention. Using hand drills, chisels, and hammers, he conducted his research on patients who had no voice and no rights. The bell tower, which still stands today as a haunting landmark, became his private laboratory. It is said that the screams echoing from that tower were so loud they could be heard across the water by the citizens of Venice, yet no one came to help. The isolation was absolute, and the madness was only just beginning to take root in the very bricks of the building. The legend of Poveglia took an even darker turn as the line between the doctor's experiments and his own sanity began to blur. For years he had operated with impunity, convinced that he was a pioneer of science. But the island, it seems, had other plans. According to the stories passed down through generations of Venetians, the very spirits the doctor had dismissed as hallucinations began to turn on him. He started claiming that he too was being haunted by the ghosts of the plague victims and the patients he had mutilated in his quest for knowledge. The screams that once belonged to his victims now echoed in his own mind, driving him into a state of absolute paranoia. The climax of this nightmare occurred on a cold night when the doctor, seemingly possessed by a blind terror, climbed to the top of the island's high bell tower. Witnesses, if there were any left among the terrified patients, claimed he was being chased by shadows, invisible forces that finally cornered him at the edge of the stone balcony. In a final desperate act, the doctor leaped from the tower. But the horror didn't end with the fall. According to a nurse who allegedly witnessed the event, the doctor survived the initial impact. As he lay gasping on the ground, a mysterious mist rose from the earth and spiraled around his body, choking the remaining life out of him. He was buried within the walls of the asylum, becoming yet another permanent resident of the soil he had drenched in blood. Shortly after this gruesome event, the hospital was officially closed. The equipment was left to rust. The beds were abandoned, and the doors were locked. The Italian government declared the island a restricted zone, but the stories refused to die. In the decades that followed, the island became a magnet for those seeking the truth behind the supernatural. Many who dared to approach the shores reported the same phenomena, a sudden overwhelming sense of dread that forced them to turn their boats around. It wasn't just the history that was repulsive. It was the feeling that the island itself was alive, watching and waiting for the next soul to step onto its gray, ashen shores. The transition from a place of medical horror to a place of pure, unadulterated haunting was complete. Decades of abandonment have turned Poveglia into a skeletal ruin, but the interest in its dark legacy has only grown. In the age of digital experiments, the island has become the ultimate challenge for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers. One of the most famous accounts comes from the crew of a popular American television show, who gained rare permission to film on the island overnight. The experience was so harrowing that the lead investigator seasoned by years of hauntings, claimed it was the most terrifying place he had ever visited. He reported being physically attacked by an unseen force and hearing a voice, clearly commanding them to leave immediately in a language that felt ancient and heavy with malice. But it isn't just ghost hunters who feel the island's rejection. In 2014, the Italian government, desperate to find a way to manage the crumbling property, put Poveglia up for auction. They hoped a wealthy investor would transform the nightmare into a luxury destination, perhaps a high-end hotel or a private estate. An Italian businessman won the bid, promising to restore the buildings. However, shortly after taking possession, he abruptly abandoned the project without a clear explanation. Rumors swirled that his family refused to spend even a single hour on the island, claiming the vibe was not just creepy, but suffocating. The deal fell through, and Poveglia was once again left to the elements, as if the island itself refused to be colonized by the living. Even the bravest locals in Venice tell stories of the shouting that comes from the lagoon on foggy nights. They say that if you cut your engine near the island, you can hear the sound of many voices whispering at once, a collective murmur of the wind sinks to thousand souls who were never given a proper resting place. The decay of the building seems to mirror the decay of the spirits trapped within. Today, the island remains a forbidden zone, protected by the police and the natural fear of the populace. But as we look at the ruins of the asylum through our lenses, we have to ask, is the danger truly supernatural? Or is it the crushing weight of human history that makes Poveglia so unbearable? As we look back at the jagged skyline of Poveglia, it becomes clear that this isn't just a story about ghosts or crumbling brick. It is a testament to the darkest chapters of human history. From the desperate victims of the Black Death who were cast away to die in agony, to the forgotten patients of a corrupt medical system, Poveglia has absorbed more pain than any one place should ever hold. Some scientists argue that hauntings are merely a form of stone tape theory. The idea that intense emotional events can be recorded into the very environment, playing back like a broken record for anyone sensitive enough to hear. If that is true, Poveglia is a symphony of echoes, a library of screams that may never be silenced. Today, the island stands as a grim reminder that some scars never heal. The Italian government continues to keep its gates locked, not just to protect the ruins from vandals, but perhaps to protect the living from what remains inside. There are those who believe that the 160,000 souls trapped in the soil are waiting for something or someone to finally acknowledge their suffering. But until then, the island remains a no man's land, a place where time has stopped and where the boundary between our world and the next is dangerously thin. If you ever find yourself in the beautiful city of Venice, and a boatman offers to take you to the island of the dolls or the island of death for a high price, remember the stories of those who never came back. The mystery of Poveglia isn't just in the shadows you see in the corner of your eye. It's in the heavy, suffocating silence that greets you the moment you step off the boat. Some places are meant to be forgotten. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. And as the mist rolls in once more over the Venetian Lagoon, Poveglia disappears from sight, but its chilling legacy remains etched in the minds of all who know its name. Thank you for joining us on this investigation into the unknown. If you believe some places are better left undisturbed, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. This is Braz Reports, and we will see you in the next mystery.